Tony Danza. Now I got to see if I can find that on YouTube.
It's too funny. Yeah, nobody wants to sit and listen to me just chat all night about doom scrolling election results.
I think you would find more.
You think we get more listeners? Jeff reads weird things he found on the internet about the election.
Oh, hold on.
Oh, wait, should I stop the recording?
Are you recording?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, maybe.
Okay.
Who's the Boss reboot confirmed by Tony Danza.
Oh, no, I'm not stopping the recording for that. That's amazing. Okay, wait. Who's the Boss reboot? Hey, everybody. This is Jeff and Laura. We're doing a Q&A today, and we have a question, but first we have to talk about Tony Danza. Okay, go for it. Who's the Boss reboot?
According to CNN Entertainment, in August, Who's the Boss reboot is confirmed by both Tony Danza and Alyssa Milano.
Are they going to be in it?
I mean, I would assume so. Isn't that why?
I don't know. They reboot all kinds of shows that don't have the people in it. I guess that's remake. That's not reboot.
Yeah, that's not. No, reboot, you have to have at least some of the same people.
At least some of the same. What is it going to be? Is he going to be like geriatric and she's going to be like his nurse?
I don't know. Milano tweeted, "I'm so excited," along with the link to the Deadline story about the reboot.
Oh my gosh. Maybe she's going to have kids and he's going to be her nanny, her kids' nanny.
I mean,
wasn't that the theme of the other one? Was he was the nanny?
Yeah. He took care of the house for, what's her name? Who was working mom,
which was weird because it wasn't like a mansion. It was just like a normal suburban house.
Well, but I think that was the whole thing, is she was a single mom.
Oh, okay.
And her brother lived there. And he came in, and the whole thing was about, it took till I was an adult to figure out why it was called Who's the Boss. But like, is he the boss or is she the boss? Like,
I've never actually thought about why it was called Who's the Boss.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. Maybe a little sexist too.
Well, I mean, it was the 80s.
That's true.
And it was like a Mr. Mom kind of premise, right? Like he's taking care of the kids and she's out earning the big bucks.
Yeah. And it's the whole like, Dad can't be mom. He's too dumb. Yeah. Mom can't work. She needs to cook. Yeah.
Yeah, but I literally have no recollection of any plot lines.
No. In fact, I get Tony Danza's, like, if I try to quote a Tony Danza line, for some reason, the only thing that comes around is Joey from Friends. That's all that comes into my head. Like, if I picture Tony Danza, I want to say, like, how you doing? But that's not Tony Danza. That's Joey from Friends.
I mean, they're kind of the same. Now I want to know what his catchphrase was.
That offended somebody.
I mean,
I'm walking here. That's also not Tony Danza, but that's what's in my head. There was a really great show on Netflix that starred Josh Groban as a virtuous detective and Tony Danza as his father, who was a dirty cop that had been like kicked off the force. And I loved it so much. I think I'm the only person in America that watched it. It made me so happy. It was like a stupid, simple, like no thought. I can just like watch this dumb, and they couldn't quite figure out Josh Groban's voice. Like sometimes he was like, in the first couple episodes, he's like super holier than thou. And then the second episodes, he becomes kind of like monk neurotic.
Yeah, I'm totally Googling Josh Groban right now because I don't know who
he's the singer. He's the like pop opera singer.
I mean, you can say those words, but that doesn't tell me who
Josh Groban.
All right, I looked him up. I still don't know who he is.
Yeah, I remember the first time I noticed that his voice was going like way awry in the show was they had a show about a like so far he had just been kind of like a really nice guy in a police department, and it was like, oh, he stands out because police aren't nice, and and police
now who's offending people.
I know this show clearly, and so police aren't nice, and he's nice. He's a good cop that follows the rules, which makes him different. And so he was Like, but then in like one of the episodes, they're in a bowling alley and he finds a quarter on the floor and he picks it up and he won't, like, he starts neurotically asking everybody around him whose quarter it is because he has to give it back. And I was like, oh no, they lost the voice. I was like, oh no, the character's gone. His voice is gone. They've lost it. And it didn't get picked up.
That's a good segue into our discussion question for this evening. But before we go all the way there, Josh Groban, Tony Danza, and Matt LeBlanc, if you are listening or watching, we sincerely apologize.
Oh, and come on the show. Oh my gosh.
I mean, right?
I want Matt LeBlanc on the podcast. So great. I want to talk about episodes, and I want to talk about Joey, and I want to talk about Friends. And I want to
talk about his show before Friends. That was
what?
Vinny and Bobby.
What?
He's the exact same character as Joey. And I think I may be the only person in America who watched it.
Wendy and I quote Joey all the time, too. Not the show Joey, but the character Joey in Friends. Yeah, you are the only person in America that watched that show. Sorry, I didn't mean to skip over that fact.
No, that's totally okay. So when Matt LeBlanc comes on the show, I also have to guest star that day. So he and I can talk about that show.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I love that idea.
I think we'll have to hashtag him or something. I don't know how
I don't know how the internet works. So, I know how to doom scroll election results. That's all I know how to do.
Yes.
Yeah.
On election day, I had 5 tabs open. I switched.
Oh, that's worse than me.
Yeah. I watched CNN for a while, and then I watched ABC for a while. And then after the president made his speech, I had to switch to Fox to see how Fox was spinning it. So I watched Fox. I watched Fox for about 90 minutes.
Yeah, you're worse than me. I just pull up the New York Times site and I just keep refreshing it so I get their newest articles. Because
I actually am really partial to the Bloomberg site. I know of the New York Times, but Bloomberg has been my go-to. Sorry, I'm going to turn my phone off because my group for my cognitive psych class, Brittany, Katie, if you are listening, nice work on our project here, but they're texting me to give me some updates. So I'm going to make that be quiet so I can find out about it after.
All right. Before we get to our massive question, give us an update. Because last time we talked on the show, you were starting your cognitive psych class.
Oh, yeah. So I'm taking 3 classes this semester and working full time, which has been a fun little juggling act there.
Yeah.
But I never actually leave my house, so there's no commute time for anything. Groceries are delivered. Everything is delivered. So for all
the same. Everything is the same.
Who are delivering, thank you. Because Jason and I would not be surviving without you. So I've learned statistics.
Nice.
Learned how to use SPSS, which has been great.
Fantastic.
So shout out to Dr. Kukuka. And my cohort is doing great in my pro seminar class, which is basically like introduction to the program. So Dr. Galupo, nice work.
Nice work. I'm going to try to get Dr. Galupo on the podcast to talk about gender identity.
Yes, let's do that.
I'm going to try to con Dr. Galupo into coming on the podcast to give that entire seminar that she gave to us.
I think that's great. I will bribe Dr. Galupo with a chocolate cake.
Oh, that's what I'm talking about.
Dr. Galupo to come and talk on your podcast.
Nice. So. Yes, this will happen. Speaking of cake, you have a birthday coming up. Happy birthday.
Thanks for sharing that with the whole world.
I didn't tell him when.
That's true. Jason has decided that for my birthday this year, he is going to bake me a cake.
Ooh.
So, yeah.
So should I order a cake and deliver it to your house?
You've been watching Nailed It. So the recipe that I use has the ingredient measurements, but not instructions, because I've done it so many times now. I don't need to have the instructions. I just need to know the correct amounts of things when I double and that sort of thing. Because once you make cake at the volume that I make cake, making one cake doesn't seem reasonable. You have to make at least 3 at a time.
You do make a lot of cakes.
So I do need to like know like big volumes instead
Yeah,
of small.
that was not a criticism or a complaint, by the way.
Oh no,
We all appreciate
well, and since your family sometimes randomly gets a
it.
cake for
Yeah,
the
it's the best. It's the best.
because when you're making one, you may as well make three.
Yeah, or
Uh,
7.
I guess I made 6 once, but it ended up being one big cake. So
Yeah,
I
that's
mean,
awesome.
I guess I made 8 once if you count my brother's wedding cake, because each one of those was like 2. So anyway, I'm digressing. I don't remember. Oh, so we've been watching Nailed It, and Jacques always says you mix the wet ingredients with the dry ingredients. So Jason was planning to just dump all the wet ingredients in and then all the dry ingredients in.
Done. Cake
Uh,
making is easy.
have you watched Nailed It?
No, I have not.
No. No, I mean him, like,
Oh
because
yeah,
we love to watch people's cake fails. So I told him I would be willing to supervise his efforts if he
it's really
wanted.
funny. I
So
love it.
I think he was disappointed that I want a vanilla cake with vanilla icing.
Yeah, that's
That's
not
my
fun.
favorite. It's my
Yeah,
favorite.
that's cool. I mean, it is your birthday. You should get to pick.
I mean, I feel like that should be a thing.
Did he get green icing so he can put a Baby Yoda on the top of it? Sorry, podcast listeners. This is what happens when Laura and I get together and we're not at work. Because by the way, if you haven't listened to earlier episodes, Laura and I work together. She's actually my boss.
Stop telling people that.
It's the truth. She hates it when I tell people she's the COO of a company. So, so we're
Especially right after the fact that this whole podcast started with me going down a Tony Danza, who's the boss.
oh no, I mean that just makes you cool with the young kids. Yeah, all the young all my teenagers are hanging out talking about Tony Danza. They're
I
all
mean, they may know who Alyssa Milano is, but
there's
probably not.
zero chance that they know it.
You know, if they watch Project Runway also,
Okay.
they might
Well,
know.
okay. I don't
What's
even know what that
that?
show is. Yeah.
Whatever.
I only watched I'm so old. I watched Josh Groban and Tony Danza detective shows on Netflix. I get super excited when I find Matt LeBlanc on Netflix. That's how old I am. I'm that old today. Um, okay, any more updates?
Reminds me, your birthday wasn't that long ago.
It wasn't. My birthday wasn't that long ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying to think if I have an update to share since we will talk about writing, I promise. Man, I'm running a course that's good and it's fun and
You're getting a lot of enthusiasm about it.
yeah, people seem to actually be getting things out of it, which is exciting. I like
Wonder
it
why
when
you feel surprised by that.
it's great when you teach something and people are like, "Hey, that was helpful." You're like,
Yeah.
"Oh, that's
When you
surprising."
teach something and people are like, hey, teach me more. That's exciting
Yeah,
too.
we're about to start week 3 and they haven't revolted yet, which is fantastic. Um,
Yeah, let's not talk about what's happening revolt wise.
oh, okay, good call. Yeah, we're recording this during election week. I think it's actually just going to play this Sunday. I think I'm just turning this one right around, but we'll see.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
So,
That's exciting.
I would have to check my schedule to know that, and I can't like check Google Tabs and talk at the same time, so we're not going to do that right now.
All right, that's fine.
Yeah, but I'm doing that. I'm having fun. I don't know when the last time we did one of these Q&As was. I'm having fun taking my kindergartner to recess every day. Yeah, that's fun. I take an hour out of the day because he's digital schooling. Thank you, COVID. And he has an hour to do recess and lunch. So like today we went to a big playground and I packed a picnic lunch and we did recess and lunch at this playground. We've gone hiking several times, like through the woods. We actually stumbled upon these really weird, strange graffitied buildings that had been like half knocked down that he loved. He was so excited about those.
I love seeing the pictures that you post on Facebook of it.
Yeah, I post a lot.
I feel like
Document.
this could be a blog for you. The Adventures of Riggs.
Yeah, the Adventures of Riggs recess. Well, because usually he's like running ahead of me by like a good 50 yards. So the pictures are typically of like landscapes with like a tiny kid down the far Yeah, his favorite thing to do, which is my least favorite thing we do, is to go to a playground where there are no other children. It's just he and I, and then he makes me play make believe with him on the playground. And so usually he'll be like, "You're the unicorn son, and I'm the unicorn daddy, and I'm going to tell you what to do." And that's usually how the and I typically in the middle of the game get put in timeout. Um, that's he loves that recess game.
To be
Uh,
clear, he is the youngest of 5, so
yes,
everybody tells him what to do.
that's true. That is true. He has a bad habit in the house of carrying the remote control around with him because he doesn't want to let it go. Because if he puts down the TV remote, some other kid might pick it up. So he just carries it with him all day. And people are like, "Where's the TV remote?" It's like, go check Riggs' room. It's probably like upstairs in his pillow. Yeah, he just walks around with it because he's like, "This is power. I have power when I have this."
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Anyway, that's my update. Okay, let's talk about. Do we have anything else to talk about? Any other updates? I mean, we've already stalled. Like,
I don't even know how long we've been recording. In fact, I didn't even know we were recording because I was searching Tony Danza. And
yeah, that's how I like to do it. Magical realism. That's not what magical realism is, people.
Now I have to look up magical realism.
It's a genre at Amazon.
At recess.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, if we actually turned into unicorns, that might be considered magical realism. Magical realism is a genre of literature that occurs where magic occurs in real world events. So, like, you know, the TV show The Magicians, or even in some sense, Harry Potter might classify as magical realism.
Okay.
But yeah. Not me hitting record while you're not looking. That's not magical realism. That's probably just me being an ass. But
it could be me being unprepared, because I remember you saying, should I turn the recording on? And I was like, okay, let me just Google this. So
yeah, that is true. That is true.
Not yours.
Okay.
But
so let's talk about our question.
Party consent state. So
yeah, the feds have more pressing stuff to worry about right now than whether or not I ask somebody to record on a podcast.
Do they? Because votes apparently can be illegal.
That's right. Come on, we can't do that. Don't get me started. I will start on my rants. We can't do it. Illegal votes. Okay, so
I mean, that would make the president's voice would make a great podcast.
It would not. I'm not doing my Trump impersonation. It's terrible, and I'm not doing it. It's
no, never. But like figuring out what the president would say.
Oh, you mean like writing the president's voice? Yeah. Oh, dear Lord, how would you do that? Oh my goodness.
Well, maybe if we talk about our
that is not our question today. Our question today is not how would you write the president's voice. It actually probably, he has a very unique voice, so it actually probably wouldn't be too difficult once you finally got down the punctuation of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It would be a lot easier to perform than it would be to write. Writing it would be difficult because there's a lot of...
Well, it would definitely be fiction.
Yeah, he leans a lot on pauses, which is not necessarily like run-on sentences. Yeah. So it would be, yeah, it's kind of like trying to write Obama's voice, because Obama leaned a ton on like weird pauses. Mm-hmm. So like, how do you write that pause?
With an ellipse.
That's true. But I always read an ellipse and I feel like somebody's like mind is wandering off, which I know that is not what they mean, but that's what it, because it's what I wait for now when somebody's texting me. So it's taking on a different, yeah, it's taking on a different tone. Now to me, an ellipse means like, just wait there.
Does anybody else like play a sound in their own head when they see that?
I don't. I heard you doing the sound though, and I think that's very fascinating.
Yeah, I hear it in my head when I see it.
It's really funny. All I ever hear in my head is anxiety. So the question for today, because...
Can we just skip right over the fact that all you ever hear in your head is anxiety?
No, if you've been listening to this podcast, you know.
Okay.
So the question for today, it's part of my charm.
Yes, but I also do worry for you a lot.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I worry for me a lot. It's all I hear in my head. The question for today is, what is something someone can do right now to improve their dialogue. So I wanted to ask this because I've been talking to, not just in the course, but other writers, not just writers in the course that I'm giving, but other writers that have kind of reached out to me or that I've been talking to on social media. And they're like, especially new writers, are like, man, I'm overwhelmed.
Mm.
They're especially, and we're in November, it's NaNoWriMo, where people are trying to get out like an absurd amount of words every day. And people who typically don't write are trying to get out a certain amount of words every day. And then we're giving them like, build this character wheel and figure out how to like make your voices unique and, you know, make each voice stand alone, but also make them complement and contrast each other. And
Mm-hmm.
so I've had a lot of writers come to me and be like, I am overwhelmed by all of this advice, since dialogue isn't something we typically think about.
Yeah.
So we think a lot about plot. We think a lot about like story structure. We think a lot about like, where's the conflict in my scene, right? Like we think a lot about that stuff, but we just don't focus on dialogue. So by like suddenly throwing all this at people,
Mm-hmm.
I've gotten a lot of like, I'm freaked out a little bit.
Sure.
So I just wanted to pause today and be like, okay, if you can't like digest, you know, how to pair an antagonist and a protagonist, or you can't
Mm-hmm.
digest like how to build a team around your protagonist, or how to like defeat monomouth by having different voices, what is one thing, maybe multiple things, we can do
Mm-hmm.
more than one tip, a new writer could start doing right now to improve their dialogue?
I think this is a really great question because I think everybody needs to start somewhere. But before we do that, I had a question for you. I've
Uh-oh.
seen this acronym, um, NAMO, what was it that you called it?
NaNoWriMo.
Yeah, what can you tell me what that is? I keep seeing the
National Write. NA is national. RWRI is write. A novel in a month.
okay,
So
so you've done this in previous
I
years.
wrote my first novel with NaNoWriMo. I
Got
wrote my first two novels with NaNoWriMo because
okay.
I wrote my first novel, which is what I'm actually editing in this course with this group
Right.
of people. I wrote my first novel, and
Also, if
then
you want to join the course,
that's too late. I wrote my first novel.
but they can email you so when you do it next time.
Oh, see, you're smart. I don't think about things like that.
Well, yeah,
Yeah,
but if
if
we
you
keep
want to get on the
talking
course
about
next
this
time,
course,
I'm sorry, I talked right over you. What did you
that's
say?
okay. I was gonna say if you want to get in the course, like they're learning a lot of good stuff, and I don't know why, but Jeff lets me come in and give people thoughts and stuff.
Whatever, you're fantastic. I love that you're coming to do it. Um, yeah, if you want to, we will run the course again. It's like 60. I think they're going to end up being about 70 hours worth of videos over 20 weeks, 80 hours worth of videos over 20 weeks, something like that.
And you're also
Um,
talking about like an abbreviated version of it.
yeah, that's the maximum you can use, but like there's people doing it right now that are like, I can't do 4 hours of video a week, which I totally understand. So it's all each week. Each of the 20 weeks is digested into a 30-minute video. So the minimum commitment is 30 minutes a week. So like, think about your dialogue. But yeah, I'll run it again, maybe sometime in the summer. So if you're interested in it and you want to get in it, just email me. We put everybody in a Slack group, so we're all sharing work and providing work and talking about work and like looking at things. Well, actually, Laura and I, there was a question about how to do a character wheel. So Laura and I and one of the other course members jumped onto a Zoom last week, and we did a character wheel for Lethal Weapon, which I'll run as a podcast episode at some
So
point.
fun.
It was great.
So
Lethal
fun.
Weapon's fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, except for the ways that it's not, which we talked about on the podcast. So you'll hear that later. You don't need to hear it now.
No,
Uh,
we won't talk about it.
yeah.
But if you want to join the class or run it next time, email Jeff
Yeah.
or leave a comment, right? Like you can
Oh,
leave comments on these things, right?
I haven't quite figured that out yet.
On YouTube, I feel like you can.
You can
I've never
definitely leave comments on YouTube.
because
I've
I'm
talked to people on YouTube. I do answer comments on YouTube. I haven't figured out yet how to get comments left on episodes. I'm working on it. Baby steps. I have a full-time job.
yeah, you
Yeah.
do.
Says my boss. Yeah, I have a full-time job that I love. It's the greatest job ever. Oh my gosh.
Well, I mean, your boss lets you take an hour off every day to hang out with your 5-year-old.
Super true. To go on adventures with Riggs.
Lets you?
Okay, back to the question.
Okay,
Man,
great question.
I am distracted. We are distracted tonight.
We are very distracted. But okay, so I'm going to start
Yeah.
because now I'm focused. So the first thing is writing dialogue can be overwhelming, just like writing anything else, right? Like it can be overwhelming. So take a deep breath and know that you can do it. Like the first thing is don't get I hate telling people not to get overwhelmed because like it's like telling people to calm down. It has
Yeah. Yeah.
exactly the reverse
Yeah.
effect.
The minute you say calm
Um,
down, everybody's like, why? Yeah.
right, right. Don't be anxious about this. No, but like it, just like any other part of writing, grammar or sentence structure or plot development, like you can learn it. It's not going to come overnight. Most people don't just wake up one day being great dialogue writers. It takes time, but trust the process and trust yourself that you're going to get there if you hone your skill. So that's like the first tip.
It's a super encouraging word.
I think the second tip is work at it, right? Like it doesn't matter what part you try to hone. And Jeff, you're great at this, both in the class, at work, and just in every interaction I've seen with you. You do this really great job of taking this huge thing and breaking it down into really small, manageable bites.
Thank you.
And I think as you're like learning to write dialogue, just like you're learning to write anything else, taking something that's big and overwhelming and feels like overbearing and like I just want to put this to the side because I just want to work on the plot because the plot's what matters. Sure, take a little bit of dialogue at a time. You don't have to take every single line in your whole book at the same time. You don't need to work every single character's voice. Just pick one character, and it doesn't have to be your main character. Start with a character who only has 5 or 6 lines of dialogue and hone that. When you feel like you've got that win, pick one that's a little bit bigger and then a little bit bigger. And by the time you're ready to tackle your protagonist, you're ready. Like it's
Yeah.
just one day, it just flows.
And
Those
you'll
two are
know when it works, right? Like, when I remember the first time I made myself laugh with the dialogue I was writing. It's a great feeling
yeah.
when you realize that, like, oh yeah, I nailed it. Uh,
Which one? Which dialogue? Character.
there
Okay.
are two, there are two characters that are reoccurring in almost every novel I've written.
Lefty.
No, Popeye and Big Tony.
Oh, Big Tony, of course. How did I
Yeah,
forget Big Tony?
Popeye and Big Tony. They reoccur, and even though it makes no logical sense that they appear in every every novel I've written, I just keep bringing them in. Usually as side characters in like a little B plot where they just appear for like one scene.
Yeah.
But there was a scene in the first book I wrote. I was on like chapter 8, and the voices in the first book I wrote are really bad. They're really terrible. They all sound the exact same. Um, and
Okay, so let's change some language a little bit.
Okay, okay.
They are great first drafts.
It was a really good first draft that probably shouldn't have been published without being edited. Probably it should not have been published without being edited, but I was on a tear. That's another story for another time.
You know,
Um,
but like we just said, it doesn't have to be
it
perfect
doesn't have to be
from the
perfect.
beginning.
Yeah.
It needs
So,
some work.
and people really enjoyed the book. So, like, I say it was terrible by my standards today, but people really liked it when I wrote it. So anyway, all that to say, I built an email list off of it. It was great. Yeah, but there's a scene where I introduced those two characters and they were sitting on a couch. And they're just being their weird selves in the middle of a scene that's going on. I needed comic relief in the scene because I was dumping a lot of information on the reader. And I was like, okay, I need to make this information dump fun. So I put two characters that I was having a good time with, and their voices were by accident very unique. And I wrote something that one of them said. I don't even remember what it was now, but it made me laugh out loud. And that was the first time I could feel like I wrote dialogue that I actually engaged with. I was like, oh, this is what this feels like, to write characters that like sound like themselves and, feel, and to it that write dialogue that actually engages readers. But yeah, anyway. So yeah, and then just to add to what you're saying, Laura, the second thing is that like, trust your ear. Like you writer who we cannot see, um, you use dialogue every day. You have spent your entire life talking to people. So part of writing realistic and engaging dialogue is trusting your own ear.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, and working at it is, I love that you said work at it because it's so important. Like, my 17-year-old, he's 17 right now, Jackson, is a fantastic oil painter. Um, really loves, uh,
Good.
he's really good, really loves painting with oils. I'm trying to convince him to keep it up in college. He's straying away from it to focus on biology, but I'm trying to get him like, hey, just keep going. Um, and he was trying to paint a button recently, like a giant button that somebody was pushing, and he couldn't get it right. So he actually cut out a piece of cardboard, built a makeshift button, took a picture of it to like, so he could see how the lighting fell on the real thing, and then
Mm-hmm.
sketched that multiple times with a pencil before he went back and tried to paint it again. And so like we need to have that kind of, um, like we typically don't do that with our dialogue. We don't think about dialogue that way, that we're like, if it doesn't sound right, we're just going to keep working it until it does. And then we're going to go back out into the real world, listen to real people talk, and then bring that knowledge back into our writing. We just don't, that's just a step we don't take, but it's something you can totally do every day.
Yeah.
Just starting to
Well,
listen to the people
and
around you.
I think that's a huge key as I cut you off while you're saying it. Um, we have a tendency to listen for our opportunity to talk. And I'm using the collective we here, not
Yeah, yeah.
you. I mean, we have spent the last however long we've worked together really focusing on communication. So we may be the exception to the rule, but in general, if you watch conversations, especially if you watch a first date, I love going to a restaurant, like back when we could go to restaurants, and look around and watch a couple that is clearly on one of their first 1 or 2 dates, or a couple who has been married for several years and you can tell that things are not going well. My heart always goes out to them. I always
Yeah.
feel
So it
for
was
them.
an intense
But like,
conversation.
you can see it, where like the indifference that happens after a long period, which is like, I feel like that's almost more hurtful than like the aggression that can
Mm-hmm.
happen. But anyway, not to be a marriage counselor here or anything, but like just watching the conversations and watching people talk past each other, or
Yeah.
watching people go, wait for a pause and jump in, and
Jump
you're
in.
not
Yeah.
they're not listening to each other,
Yeah.
listening to understand, listening to be in the moment is a different kind of listening. And while it's not a writing skill per se, it's a skill that will make you a better dialogue writer, because when you really start to listen, I mean, we were talking about the president a little while ago, and we were talking about his cadence, and we were talking about Obama's cadence, and like listening to the way that people speak, the words that they choose, but also how they are going to portray them, I think is really important. And I think the people who are actually the best at this are impressionists. So if
Yeah.
you ever watch somebody who can do an impression of someone, it's uncanny how they're able to find the voice of that person. Anyway, so you were talking about listening, and that
No,
was
no, I thought that was really great. It reminds me of, I may have mentioned this illustration on the podcast before. I don't actually remember, but when I was in high school, I went out to, I had the opportunity to go to Amsterdam. Um, my father was speaking because he was, a big deal. And so he took me with him as his secretary, and I got to go to, he had to go to a conference all day. So he was just like, hey, have fun in Amsterdam. And me, being the nerdy kid that I am, did not go to the red light district. I went to all of the museums because that's who I am. And
nothing wrong
um,
with that.
no, I had a great time. And I went to, they have the Van Gogh Museum there. And one of the most memorable experiences I had is I didn't have a lot of respect for Impressionist paintings back then. Because I was kind of like, you guys are just like throwing crap on a canvas, oh, it's an
Mm-hmm.
impression, but you can't actually paint. And I remember seeing Van Gogh's sketchbooks where he would like sit, the plaque explained that he'd sit in the town square and just spend all day drawing noses, or spend all day like drawing hands, or spend all day. And it's very much, it reminded me, I was playing high school sports back then, and I can remember during that time I would spend like hours upon hours in a batting cage, just focusing on how my hip moved when I swung a baseball bat, and then
Mhm.
focusing on how my wrists moved when the bat snapped, and then focusing on like just my step. Like I can remember sitting for like 45 minutes one practice, on the sideline. The coach just made me practice taking the step you take when you swing, like just working on like those detail technician type things. And the question is, like, if other artists and other creatives are willing to do this, why do we as writers believe that we can just jump right into the to
Mhm.
writing, um, and all of a sudden put words on the page and not work out in that way like an athlete would work out?
Mhm.
Yeah, and so when I started writing, this was something I would do, is I just carry around. I love moleskin notebooks because I get obsessed with weird things, and so I would just carry around a moleskin notebook. And when somebody would say something that, like, just like a phrase or like a sentence, or like I'd watch, like you'd said, like I'd be like at coffee, and I'd see two people talking, and the conversation they're having is really interesting. I'd just write it down. um like finding things, or like I'd be in a meeting and I'd be taking notes in the meeting, but I'd also be doing my best to transcribe what certain people were saying, because I found their voice interesting. So, and when I say I found their voice interesting, I don't mean how it sounds, I mean the way that they used words. And I think that's paid off in the long term, because I now, after doing that for years and years, I have a resource in my head of like voices that I can draw on. Like, okay, now I want this character to sound like this person. Because you work it like an athlete works there. Like when I was playing football, we used to, like, I was on the offensive line, and we'd always learn how to, like, blocking was the thing that we did. That was the only thing we were really allowed to do. And so you just sat there and you like hit the sled all day long. You like learn how to like position your shoulder into the pad so that like you could get maximum hit. And like that's that kind of working out is something that you can start doing right now, right? Because I know when you're doing NaNoWriMo, the goal is to finish one book, but my hope for every writer is that your goal is a lifetime of literature. So
Right.
like cranking out a lifetime of books. Like, yeah, this is the one you're working on right now, and it's super important. And if it's your first one, or even if it's your last one, like your quote unquote like newest one, it may feel like this is the only one I'm going to do. But I hope that's not true. I hope it's just one game in an athletic career of writing that you can push forward through. So,
Mhm.
I think your tip is great, Laura. Like, let's start working on that right now, um, and just start practicing
So
that
you,
dialogue.
yeah, you said something else right there. Two things. I'll circle back to the first one, but um, another tip that comes to mind is you just said that you have years and years of people's voices in books, in your moleskin notebooks.
So, in my
Um,
head.
the thing about that is, and I know this because I know your background. We've been friends for a really long time.
Yeah,
Um,
almost 20 years.
the, yeah, the thing about your books, and more than your books, is the people you surround yourself with is an extremely diverse group.
Oh yeah.
And I would challenge anyone who spends time in groups, either virtually or in person, if everybody looks like you and talks like you and has the same background as you, my challenge for you is to diversify.
Yeah.
Find someone who doesn't look like you, find someone who doesn't have a background as you, and engage them to learn about them. And don't do it from a token, I need a friend who's diverse, right? Like
I
that's the
know.
worst.
Fail.
But
Yeah.
find
It's
somebody you can engage with and you can be a part of their life and they can be a part of your life. Diversity is what, I'm going to get a little political here, diversity is what makes this country great. right?
Yeah.
Like, stop creating spaces where it's all looking like you, and find people who don't look like you and don't talk like you and don't have the same background as you, because I guarantee you your character voices will become more realistic and have more depth to them when you are comparing yourself to somebody who is not the same as you. And again, let's talk while we're down this path. White privilege is a thing.
Yeah.
If everyone looks like you and talks like you, when you understand somebody else's voice, when you understand somebody else's story, it gives you the opportunity to tell your story differently. It gives you the opportunity to tell their story.
Yeah,
So,
if you ask any writer, like, how do I write better settings? How do I write better places for my plot? They'll tell you, go there, travel there, like, see that place, experience that place, appreciate that place, be a part of that place, right? Like, Joanna Penn, who I know you make fun of me, Laura, for bringing up on the podcast all the time,
no,
but
I
Joanna
don't.
Penn
I
has,
know you love her.
like, dude, her books are great.
Still, as many times as you've said her name to me, I still have not read one of her books.
Oh, they're so good. The Mouth
Um,
Walker series is fantastic. But
to add
so
to all the people I've apologized to, I apologize, Joanna Penn. I
that's
will. We'll get to
that's
your book
that's right.
when you come on this podcast. I will. I
Oh,
will have read your book by the
hashtag
time
life
you come
goals.
on.
But she has a travel podcast where she talks about traveling and how traveling impacts her writing. Um, it is odd to me that we think that, like, we don't need to experience and appreciate and dive into people like we dive into places.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, the more people you can get around that aren't like you, the better. And if we're writing a profession, like if you're writing a cop book, they'll tell you, like, go be with cops, like, go do a ride along, right? Like, and a lot of times we do it and they're like, well, do a ride along in order to learn the procedures that cops go through. No, do a ride along to learn the voices, right?
Right.
Like, if
Learn their
you're
experiences.
yeah, like, Grisham wrote legal thrillers not because Grisham was super excited about bringing the law into literature, but because he was a lawyer. So, like, those are voices that he had in his head. He knew the clients he was working with. He knew the
Yep.
opposing counsel. He knew how judges sounded, and
Yep.
so he was using his experience. So if you want to write diverse voices, start diversifying your experiences with people. Get in environments that aren't environments you're typically in. Put yourself in that place as a learner and someone who appreciates others.
Absolutely.
Yeah, never as a judge. Going
Yeah.
into somewhere as a judge and a critic is not
Uh,
helpful to
no.
you or to the people you're around. But if you go in as somebody who is a loving servant, who appreciates others and is there to learn, um,
Yep.
yeah, you'll start getting diverse voices in your head. So yeah, that's another thing you can start doing. Man, great tips.
Yeah.
So you can be encouraged that you have dialogue in your head because it's something you're naturally around and have been doing. Like Laura said, you can start working on it right now by paying attention to the conversations happening around you, using
Mm-hmm.
those conversations as fuel, and start really thinking about and paying attention to how people talk.
Yep.
And then you can diversify the people around you so that you're having different experiences to put those voices in your head.
Yep.
Um, what other tips you got?
Before I get to another tip, I need to go back to the other thing that I was going to tell you.
Oh,
So, because remember I said two and I was going to hold one and I was going to talk
yeah,
about
yeah. I'm sorry, I
writing.
totally forgot.
No, it's okay. I remembered. So you were talking about Van Gogh, and I'm a huge fan of Van Gogh. I actually saw the Van Gogh exhibit at in New York.
Ooh, I
Yeah,
bet that was great.
my friend who lived in New York,
Yeah.
and we went to I guess it's the Modern Museum of Art up there. Anyway,
Yeah,
Irving
after I
Stone.
got over my ego, by the way, I know I was 16 at the time. My stupid 16-year-old cocky self. After I got over that, I really became a giant fan and learned to
I mean,
appreciate his work. Yeah.
how can you not? I mean, he's one
Well,
of the best.
my 16-year-old self would be like, it doesn't even look like a flower. Anyway, uh, sorry, you're saying.
No. Irving Stone wrote a fantastic book. I actually had to Google the title of it because it's been so long since I read it. Um, Called Lust for Life,
Ooh,
about Van Gogh's life. Uh,
oh,
so yeah, it's been 25 years
yeah, I'll have to check that out.
since I read it. But yeah,
Yeah.
He
Is
wrote
that?
a whole series of historical fiction.
I was
Like,
going to ask, did he also write The Agony and the Ecstasy?
yes, he did.
I love
Uh,
The Agony and the Ecstasy so much.
maybe not.
That's Michelangelo and Da Vinci.
Um, I don't know. Hold on. Give me a second. I still have it up because again, I couldn't remember the title. Um, yes, yes, yes.
Oh,
It's
that's an
Agony.
amazing book.
You know, I have not read that one, so I'll have to
And
check.
I didn't even know he wrote anything else.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna go find that.
But
Watch out, book club. That may be coming in February.
good, because I still haven't read my. I started the November one and then put it down and haven't gone back to it. So
Oh, it's so good.
I gotta finish it. But historical fiction writers, the way that you're talking about, the way that like if you're going to write a cop novel, if you're going to write a legal novel, if you're going to write a historical fiction, you're going to have to learn about who they were and what they were like and how they spoke and that sort of thing. So it's really the same. It doesn't matter what genre you're writing. um, and while we're kind of in this area, there's there's a possibility that people who are writing magical realism or people who are writing sci-fi or fantasy are like, well, my characters don't exist in this plane,
I
so
read an orc. Yeah.
it doesn't matter. Like, I don't, who am I going to base this after? Like, where's this voice going to come from? It's, you know, it's easy to find excuses to not do these things. But I would just encourage you that if you find yourself thinking that these tips aren't going to work for any reason, to just kind of go back to Jeff's 16-year-old self and Jeff's now about like, um, the the one thing that I have found over the years, just working with so many people about conversation skills and communication in general, is that there's a humility that comes in. You know, as we were talking about it, you use different words as you were saying, like go into other spaces and meet other people, but there's a humility that has to happen in order to do that, and understanding that while your way is good, other people's way is good as well, maybe even better than yours. So I would just encourage you, if you're finding that these tips feel like they aren't something that are going to be tangible for you, that's okay. Try them anyway, because you may be surprised.
Yeah.
So but I do have another tip. All of
Ooh.
our all of our things up to this point have been kind of like preparatory behaviors, right? Like
Yeah, yeah.
stay encouraged, listen to other people, take one bite at a time. Like those are all like, they're not tangible. They're not, let me go and sit down and write. One of the challenges that you're doing in your class, I think is a really cool one, but it's like write a chapter without dialogue, with nothing but dialogue.
Yeah.
So that's a really cool tip to get started on focusing on it. But another like super practical tip is find someone who is not a writer to read your dialogue.
Yep.
Um, that's actually how I got started as an editor. Is I was a reader and I had a friend who was writing a book.
It's like, read this. Read it.
And
Here's
because
another chapter. Read this
I
chapter.
cannot keep my opinions to myself, but
Thankfully.
the thing about non-writers is that they see dialogue differently than writers see dialogue. Writers see dialogue as a way to get somewhere in their story, which is fantastic. They also sometimes see dialogue as an opportunity to make a big point and have a big scene and those sorts of things. But that's not how dialogue really works. Dialogue in real life is more about the emotion behind it necessarily than the words.
Yeah.
So having somebody who doesn't know what they're doing, and I mean that in with the greatest amount of respect there, not from an off the cuff dismissive standpoint, but somebody who isn't trained as a writer, let them read your dialogue and ask them specifically, can you tell the difference between, like, ideally you'll take out the descriptions of your characters and let them read the dialogue, and then ask them to describe your character
Yeah.
to you just based off of the dialogue. And if they can see who your characters are with just their voice, you've nailed it.
Yeah, and just to clarify, when we say describe your characters, we're not talking about like, oh, I feel like this one's 6 foot with blonde hair, and then this one's 4 foot with brown hair, and then this one's clearly an elf, right? Like what we're saying is that like they should be able, if you can take, so let's say, and sorry, to add to the tip, do not give someone your whole book. They will not read your whole book, right? Like when I started giving Laura pages, 5,000 words at a time, maximum, right? 2,500 words at a time. Part of that was because I was coming to writing like an athlete who wanted to hone skills. So I was practicing things with the pages I gave. So it was like, I want to get the emotional tone of this right. Can you read it? So, and thankfully,
As an aside, while you're
graciously did.
stuttering for your next thought,
Yeah.
after all of these years we've worked together, I still have no idea what 5,000 words translates to in page count.
Yeah, keep it that way. I have to know something you don't know. So
And I'll read it, I'll give it back to you, but I never know how that
yeah,
translates.
it's about a chapter. It depends on genre. Anyway, so all that to say, like, don't give somebody a whole book. Give them a scene. Ask them to read the scene. And what Laura's talking about by like pull everything out by the dialogue, write the whole chapter. Like write the scene. Get the whole scene out. And then take a separate Word document or Scrivener page or whatever it is you're working in. Take a blank one, copy the scene, put it into that other one, and then delete everything but what's inside of quotation marks. And then hand it to somebody and ask them, how do these two characters feel to you? What do they sound like? Do they sound happy or sad? Do they sound angry? And be open to hear what their feedback is. And then when they tell you, ask them why. Why do you say that? What is happening? Because you may have, and do not defend your work. Don't defend your work. That's not the point of
Humility.
learning.
Humility. The
Yeah.
word of the day, humility.
Humility. Don't defend your work. So like, if they're like, well, they're sad, the next phrase out of your mouth should not be, no, don't you see that they're happy? I was teasing my 16-year-old about this earlier. My daughter, she's always asking me for help with her homework. And she'll be like, hey, what's the answer to and specifically writing homework, she'll be like, what's the thesis statement to this paragraph? And I'll be like, well, the thesis statement is blah, 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 blah. She'll be like, no, but. I'm like, don't say no, but. Like, you ask me a question. I give you an answer.
Okay.
Don't say no, but.
While we're talking about having to defend, I broke my ankle playing ice hockey about a decade ago.
Oh, man, I can't believe that was that long ago.
I know, right? Crazy. So I'm at the hospital and I am waiting for surgery. And the nurse comes in and says, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much pain are you in? And I said, about a 4. It's just kind of throbbing. And she goes, oh, if it's throbbing, it's a 6. I'm like,
yeah.
Do you want to just
It's
answer these questions?
What kind of pain are you in?
You want to pay my insurance bill too? Like, you can't ask. You can't ask, like Jeff's daughter asking for help. You cannot ask for help and then deny what somebody is telling
what somebody
you.
says. So listen with open ears. Know that when you give them your work, it's not perfect, and it's likely not hitting the emotional tones you want it to. So otherwise, you wouldn't be giving it to somebody. You just be like, this is perfect. I'm going to publish it right now. So give it to them. Ask them, just read the sentences on the page. How do they feel? How does that character feel? Listen to what they say, and then ask them why. Why do you, what is it about that makes you think that? And they may tell you, I don't know. I read it out loud and I'm happy, so it sounds happy, right? Like, but it's a good way to get feedback on your dialogue and to start kind of thinking through intentionally the words you're using on the page. And if you can find a partner that enjoys reading your work and will take it, a scene at a time with you, That's great. Now, I know some of you are listening to this and you're like, scene at a time, I'm trying to write a book a month, right? Like I'm in the, not just NaNoWriMo, but like I'm in this, rapid release schedule. Not every tool we talk about is going to work for everybody, right? Like, and let's just say that up front that like, under no circumstances do I think anyone should be emulating us, where it's
Mm,
like, oh, I'm going to do it exactly like they do it. The reason we teach this stuff is because hopefully by listening to one another and talking with one another, you can put some tricks in your bag that will help you, right? Like, so that's the goal. Take
yeah,
what works. What isn't working for you, throw it out. Um, and then learn the next thing, right? Like, so that you can build a toolbox of tools that are working for you. And so these are just the tools that are working for us.
yeah.
Um,
Good, good, good tip there. That's
I
a
have I have my moments.
yeah.
They're few and far between, but
You're
I
so
have them.
self-deprecating.
Um,
You're an expert at this. Oh,
I am an expert at self-deprecation. Sorry, we're gonna stop doing that. And that was the royal we. So,
we have a lot of we usage.
we'll stop doing this. It's because my boss makes me write all these simulations that use MI. So I'm constantly talking about we need to do these things.
Your boss sounds
Man, she's
something.
rough. Um, MI is motivational interviewing, by the way. You can look that
Oh,
up.
yeah, that's you should probably explain that.
Yeah, we gotta say
Um,
that. Okay, mic
when,
tip. I get to do mic tip.
oh, sorry, I was gonna talk about the person you should ask to read your book.
Oh yeah. No, finish your tip first.
Yeah, yeah. So find somebody who is going to be open and honest with you. Not somebody who is going to be a yes person and
Yeah.
just say, this is great, this is fantastic. You need those people reading for you because you need the encouragement and you need somebody who's always in your corner and is always going to support you. My mom is like that. I can do no wrong in my mother's eyes. She is my biggest champion. She is the reason that I think I can do anything because she's been in my corner the whole time. But when I need constructive feedback, she's not the person I'm going to go
Oh,
to. She's
yeah.
going to go, that's so great, which is wonderful. It's encouraging, but it's not going to be the feedback that I need to hone the voice of my character. So find somebody. Now, please, by all means, give it to the person who's going to encourage you. But if you're trying to hone your voice or the voice of your characters, find somebody who's going to be open and honest with you. May not be your spouse because the relationship that you have with your spouse may be multi-layered, and getting and giving feedback on work product within your intimate relationship may not be the best thing. But find somebody you trust who's going to be open and honest with you and who's not going to hold back. You don't want somebody who's going to pull punches.
No.
So
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And I would so here's my tip. My tip's more technical, and because we've done a lot of philosophical tips today, so my tip's more technical. Um, Something that helps me is if I write a scene and I'm like, man, it just doesn't sound right or just doesn't feel right. What I will do is, like, let's say it's a conversation between two people. I will copy and paste into a new document all of the sentences said by character A, and I'll just line them up one after the other.
mm,
And then next to that, I will copy and paste all the characters that sound like character B. And that way I can just, outside of the context of the script completely, I can just read what character A is saying, and then I can read what character B is saying, and then I can ask myself, how are they different? How do these two characters sound different from each other? Right? Like, it's just a cheap, it'll take you, like, it depends on how good you are at copying and pasting, but if you're reasonably good at copying and pasting, it'll take you 10 minutes to do a single scene, right? Like, and I always find something and I'm like, oh, I could do this thing with this character, and that'll differentiate the two voices. Um, so anyway, that's just a quick and
that's a
dirty
that's a great tip.
technical trip. Oh, thank you.
That's a great tip.
Yeah,
Yeah, I like
technical
that.
technical tip. Technical
Yeah.
tip. It's a quick and dirty technical tip. Oh, there we
So
go.
everything we've talked about today has been kind of targeted at people who've been writing for a long time. Um, Not necessarily, it doesn't have to be, but like a lot of our tips are about like, take a look at the work that you've already done,
Oh
take a
yeah,
look
yeah.
at, right? Like if you've already written a scene,
Yeah.
if you're at that stage where you're not really sure how to get started in writing, and you're not really sure how, and this kind of goes back to the tip that we had earlier about listening, but if we're talking about a technical tip, um, turn on closed captioning on your television,
Mm-hmm.
or take your favorite movie and Google the movie script
Mm-hmm.
itself. Look and see how people speak when it's written down.
Yeah.
So if you're not sure what dialogue is supposed to look like, and while I guess this is also a tip for somebody who's trying to hone and edit their voices of their characters, but if you're not sure where to get started, looking at the way the experts have written is also a good way to see how character voice can change, because one of the hardest things to do is go, my dialogue needs to get better, but I don't know what I'm aiming for.
Mm-hmm.
So finding something that's really great, something that you aspire to, find a book that you've loved and you've loved the characters. You've probably loved the characters because of the dialogue.
Yep.
Go through that book and just pull out, like you were saying about your own work, just pull out that character's voice for a chapter and just read nothing but what that character says, and then that way you have something, you have a benchmark. It's really hard to know how to get better if you don't know what better looks like.
Yeah,
So
it's funny you bring that up. I didn't even think about it, but something I used to do when I first started blogging, which was a long time ago, is I would like, but I wasn't blogging fiction. I was just like writing thoughts. I used to copy scenes for people. So like if I really liked a scene in a book, I just prop the book open and I'd copy like a page of the book. I just retype it. And retyping work you respect really helps you see it in a different way. So good. Yeah. It's a good goes for TV and like looking at scripts too. Like that kind of like copying of things is actually a helpful way to learn.
yeah.
Yeah.
What I like about like a TV or a movie script is that you can hear it and then you can see it
Yeah.
back to back.
Yep.
I definitely love like finding a book and, like you're saying, copying. And, you know, I had said it too about find something you really love and just pull that out.
Yep.
But there is something really like eye-opening about seeing the way, and that's why I said closed captioning on your television.
Yeah. Seeing the way words are translated through voice. Yeah.
Right. Because when we listen, we're listening for, hopefully we're listening for content. Sometimes we're, like we said earlier, we're listening for a turn to talk. But seeing how, because, and I guarantee if you're transcribing or trying to transcribe a conversation real time, you're going to miss about half of it. I did recently look up how, I didn't look it up. It came across some feed I was looking at, the way that I can't remember what they're called, the stenographer works in a courtroom, and how they're typing. They're not typing letters. They're typing like patterns of keys that make words. It's crazy.
That's funny.
So hats off to them as well.
I didn't know that. I'll have to look that up.
Yeah, now everybody's going to look that up, and everybody. The one person who's listening still is going to.
The one person, our final remaining listener.
Thanks for listening. You win a prize.
Yay!
Let us know. Leave a comment that you heard that you get a prize, and we'll figure out what your prize is.
Yay! That's really funny. All right, we should call it. This has been great. Thank you, Laura, for coming on and doing Q&A with me. It's fun.
I love that you let me come on and talk with you.
Yeah, of course. It's a blast.
I also really appreciate that you let me read your books.
I love that you read my books. You give me fantastic feedback. It's
I
the best.
See your characters as they're developing.
As they're developing.
My favorite. Okay, so my favorite story. I know you're trying to wrap up, but I just have to tell us one more story.
Okay.
So I remember reading Mencken and the Monsters, and we had a long conversation in Panera about Mencken, and we've talked about this in previous conversations and about how Mencken's starting with his job and whatever.
Yeah.
But I remember, like, at the end of the conversation, you asked me, what does Mencken look like? And I described Mencken to you, and you're like, okay, because that was the vision I saw was the vision that you had for your
Yeah.
character, but there were several other beta readers that you had who
Yeah.
did not see
Who
Mencken
did not get who
the
Mencken
same
was.
way that
Yeah.
I saw Mencken.
Yeah.
So it was, I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah.
And what a fun thing for me as a beta reader. I don't know how fun it was for you as a writer, but
Oh, it
uh,
was super educational. Yeah. It was very educational. And I didn't know what I was doing. It paid off, but I would give beta readers stuff to read, and then I would have like a survey monkey for them to fill out afterwards with like questions that I wanted to know. Because I was approaching it like I would approach a physics class in college. It was very, I didn't quite get the art yet of writing. For me, it was like, this is a math problem. I can figure this thing out. Uh,
Jeff is very data driven.
I am
For
very
those of
data
you who
driven.
don't know,
Yeah.
very data driven. Anyway,
All
thank you
right.
so much.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody. I'm going to turn off the recording. Maybe.